like to welcome everyone to the joint meeting of the Maryland Heights and Creve Coeur Township Democratic Clubs. We have hopefully an informative evening planned for everybody. And I want to thank the League of Women Voters who will be moderating tonight. Before we get to the two candidate forums that we have, I'd like to ask the president of the Creve Coeur Township, Florence Pullen, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. If you wait just a moment. Okay, is the flag showing?
I see the flag.
Okay.
I don't see the pledge.
It's behind you. You still have the welcome to the joint meeting, Harvey, on the screen. You probably want to.
Yeah, I want to make that go away if I can. 1 second here. I figure out how to. There we go.
There we go.
Is that better?
Yep.
Yeah. I don't see the pledge.
Okay, we'll get that up in a second. Still learning a little bit about Zoom here, folks. So patience is good. Okay. Put the wrong one up, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
More fun. Okay, 1 more second. Sorry about that. We will get there. Screen share. Well, you know what? I'm having trouble with this.
We'll just say the Pledge of Allegiance. Harvey, how about that?
Yeah,
we'll
I think we will. I'm so sorry. Go right ahead and lead us, if you would, Florence.
Yes, maybe I'll say the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, and we have two candidates who have asked for some time. It's a tradition in our club to invite candidates to have 2 minutes at the beginning of every meeting to help us get acquainted with them and let us know what's going on. And that would be Sue Meredith and Sydney Jackson. Both of them are on the ballot in August for committee woman in Creve Coeur Township. And Sydney, if you would go first with 2 minutes of tell us about yourself and why we should give you our votes.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to Harvey and Florence for allowing me the opportunity to speak at the last few meetings that we've had. My name is Sydney Jackson, and I am a candidate for Democratic Committee Woman of the Creve Coeur Township. I think we have a larger audience tonight than usual, so I want to give a little bit of background information about me for those who may not know. I've lived in the Creve Coeur Township for the last 5 years. Much of my free time and energy has been focused on community organizing work. I just finished my second term as a leadership team member of a racial justice organization called the West County Community Action Network, which holds vigils at rotating locations around West County every Saturday since the murder of Michael Brown in 2014, to unequivocally state that Black Lives Matter. I was appointed by the city of Creve Coeur to serve on the Venable Park Task Force and was elected by members of the task force as vice chair. I was elected to serve as a delegate to the Missouri State Democratic Convention in June of this year, and elected to serve as a delegate to the Democratic National Convention this coming August. So I'm really excited about that. So far on my journey, I've been honored to receive support from the NARAL Pro-Choice Missouri PAC as a friend of reproductive freedom, as well as the Friend of the Caucus designation from the National Women's Political Caucus. My main objectives for this position are to make sure that we get more people from a wider demographic involved in our township. We have some great candidates, Democratic candidates, so I want to make sure that we have the opportunity to support all of them. If you would like to support my campaign or learn more about me, you can visit my website at Sydney, SYDNI, the number 4mo.com, or feel free to call or text me at 314-527-1262. Thanks.
Thank you, Sydney. And next for the same position, committee woman.
Harvey, before we move forward, if you're not speaking, if you can please hit mute on your computer, it will help with feedback. So I think Florence, Harvey, Mark, if you guys could hit mute, and then Sue, have at it.
Okay. Sue?
All right.
Meredith, also candidate, and you are the current committee woman for Creve Coeur. The floor is yours.
Okay, yes. I am the committee woman for Creve Coeur Township. I was elected to this position for the first time in 2012, the same year than an election that I was elected state representative for the 71st district, which includes like part of 4 different townships. But Creve Coeur was the biggest one, and I have lived in Creve Coeur for over 30 years, and I'm pretty familiar with everybody who lives here. Creve Coeur Township, I want to make that clear. Creve Coeur and Creve Coeur Township are 2 different places. Well, they're kind of the same place, but they overlap. Anyway, I've explained that all in my literature that I've mailed out to you. Anybody has any questions about anything that I've done in my past or what we're going to do in the future, I am sending you a mailer. You should be receiving it soon. It has an email address on it. Just send me an email and I always answer. It's one of the things I've always done. If anybody writes to me or calls me, whatever, they're going to get an answer, because what everybody thinks is important, because things that happen in our community are important to each and every one of us, and each and every one of you are important to me. So thank you, Harvey, for the opportunity.
Kayla.
I have to remember to unmute. Thank you. And our first candidate forum is for the, I'm sorry, I'm blanking out here, for County Council District 2. We have 2 candidates, Kelly Dunaway, who is the incumbent, and Barry Glantz, who is currently mayor of Creve Coeur. And again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters. They will be moderating this forum and the county executive forum that will be on immediately following this. Kathleen Farrell, moderator, and Yvette Kell, timekeeper, thank you very much. And the floor is yours.
Okay. As Harvey said, I'm Kathleen Farrell, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters and our host, the Maryland Heights and the Creve Coeur Township Democratic Clubs, we welcome you to these 2 forums. I want to thank our candidates and hosts for making this happen. All of us are living with new challenges, but I'm thinking that, this might be easier than we thought, and we might use these kinds of devices a lot more to make our democracy work. The League believes that one of the best ways to decide whether or not to vote for a candidate is to hear them speak in person, and this is in person in our age, and to answer the questions that you have. And that's the reason that we take questions from the audience and the public and use those to address the candidates. The 2 candidates for Council District 2 are Ms. Dunaway and Mr. Glantz, and the timekeeper is Yvette Kell. She's going to time all opening and closing statements, and the candidates are going to have 2 minutes for their opening statements and 1 minute for their closing statements. And then I'm going to ask questions of both candidates, and they will have the opportunity to answer each question in 1 minute. We've looked over a number of questions that have been submitted. If you still want to submit questions, you can try to do that through the question and answer feature on the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our absolute best to pick up some of those if they're not already on our list. So I think that this is a good time to think about what they're saying and what else you might want to do. So with no further ado, let's start with Ms. Dunaway with your 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you all so much. I'm your councilwoman, Kelly Dunaway. I'm a lifelong Democrat, and I fight every day to see our values take hold in our laws and policies. When you all elected me last year, I became a member of the historic Women Democratic Majority on the St. Louis County Council, and we have prioritized working families, the environment, and accountability in government. In the last year, I fought to ensure that environmental efficiency and safety standards were baked into the St. Louis County building codes. We passed an affordable housing trust fund, providing money to developers, programs, and local governments seeking to expand access to housing. We raised the minimum wage to $15 per hour on St. Louis County contracts, and we passed a red flag law to keep concealed guns out of the hands of perpetrators of intimate violence. Many of these things passed 4-3, squeaking by because my swing seat is held by a real Democrat fighting hard for our values. Our legislative priorities took a backseat to COVID-19, and since then, we have been working hard to ensure that our $173 million CARES grant funding goes to those most in need. And now, with demands for police reform and our collective need to rip systemic racism out of our government and policing, we need our Democratic majority more than ever. We are reimagining public safety, taking a new look at the Ferguson Commission report, and are working to ensure that right here in St. Louis County, we lead our region and beyond in what's possible in government.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Glantz, it's your turn.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. My name is Barry Glantz, and I'm currently the mayor of Creve Coeur and a candidate for the St. Louis County Council in the 2nd District. My sincere thanks to the Creve Coeur and Maryland Heights Township Democratic Clubs and the League of Women Voters for the opportunity to share a little bit about myself with all of you. For 28 years, I have served my community in numerous capacities, and as such, my local government experience is unmatched in the August 4th primary election. In these difficult times, our community is in need of leaders who guide with a steady hand, safeguarding all that is good, advocating for what needs improvement, and collaborating rather than being divisive in order to achieve successful outcomes to very complex issues. We often hear our elected leaders promising how they will fight for us. I dislike that verbiage. Fighting implies that there is a winner and a loser. We must find ways to work together, which means talking as well as listening and taking the necessary and appropriate actions in order to reach a place of consensus that allows everyone to thrive. As mayor, I am most proud of my efforts and subsequent results in fostering a genuine sense of community. This was achieved by being accessible to constituents, appointing a wide variety of citizens to our various committees, honoring all voices to ensure that people feel heard and respected, and taking into account truths about our city that may have been difficult to hear, while also taking responsibility to address those issues with an honest intent for positive change. My goal in running for the District 2 seat is to broaden my reach and help generate those same realizations in a spirit of collaboration within St. Louis County government. I am the candidate who can truly say I have and shall continue to, and that is why I'm endorsed by the mayors of almost every single municipality within District 2.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. Glantz, the first question is going to go to you. We just are going to go back and forth and take turns here. We had several people submit questions that were like this. How will you represent all parts of District 2? It's a very different district depending on where you are. How will you do that?
I'm familiar with every municipality in the district and in unincorporated St. Louis County. I have relationships with elected officials in every municipality in the district. I am accessible and I'm available. And similar to the way I run coffee with the mayor in the city of Creve Coeur, I will hold the same kind of forums with residents and stakeholders throughout the District 2 community.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Dunaway, same question?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, how will you represent all parts of District 2 since it's so different?
The same way I have been for the last year. I go to the Democratic Township Club meetings every month. Since they've moved to Zoom, I've been there. I show up for when the schools or organizations or businesses are having special events. I am regularly speaking with constituents on the phone, by email, and I have continued to make myself and my office available to help provide resource direction, answer questions, and host meetings in the office.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Dunaway, this one is for you, and it's an extension of the last question. What will you do to make sure that the poor communities in District 2 get the resources they need?
Well, I think that, right now is a very different time, and I chair our oversight committee for the COVID funding that the county received from the federal government. And we are working really hard with the county executive's office to ensure that that money is going where it needs. We view our budget as a moral document, which means that we have millions of dollars in humanitarian funds that are going to poor communities now for housing assistance, for food assistance. Later this week, we're going to be working to try to secure money to help kids who have been left behind by the shortened school years get caught up and ensure that they have the resources and technology to get caught up and stay caught up with whatever school is going to look like this fall. And I'm going to continue to work with my elected state representatives and state senators who I work with on a regular basis to ensure that we're collaborating across governments to ensure that the right funds and the right programs and the right systemic changes are being directed where it is most needed.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Glantz.
Yes. Oh, the same. Can you repeat the question, please? I'm sorry.
Yes. How are you going to help those poor communities in District 2 get the resources they need?
I think it's important to collaborate with elected leaders throughout the community. And to find out what the needs are, and to make sure that needs are met equitably across all community lines. I can't pretend to sit in the footsteps and decide who has greater needs than others, but I think that's a collaborative effort that needs to take place between all elected leaders and community leaders throughout District 2.
Okay, Mr. Glantz, you get to go first on this one. What special initiatives would you take to make sure that residents in the unincorporated areas in District 2 are served?
That's an interesting question. One of the things that I've thought about extensively is that perhaps St. Louis County should get out of the business of acting as a municipality. There's a large swath of land between, for instance, the city of Creve Coeur and Maryland Heights. And I think that we should start opening discussions between the two communities in St. Louis County to perhaps incorporate that into one or both of the communities. St. Louis County needs to act as a county rather than a municipality. The city of Creve Coeur, the city of Maryland Heights provide excellent services to their residents. I think the residents of the unincorporated areas should, if so desired, become part of the municipalities and receive the services that they offer.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Dunaway? You need to unmute.
Got it. Sorry about that. I actually think that's a good question for the constituents who live in the unincorporated parts of St. Louis County. We do a lot of work. Marilyn Beck, my legislative assistant, and I, responding to and ensuring that resources get to those folks. And I bet you're not going to find too many who have been disappointed with the level of service we provide. We are quick, We quickly dispatch whichever department they need access to, whether that's transportation and public works, which is the vast majority of them. We have some problem properties that we're trying to deal with. But I would say that the vast majority of our constituents are happy with the service that they're getting from St. Louis County government. And if they would want to leave and join a municipality, I would listen to them and support them in that endeavor. But I think it's really going to be up to them what they prefer.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me. Ms. Dunaway, you get to answer this one first. We had 2 questions submitted from families, new families who had just moved to District 2. And they're young families with children. They want to know how you're going to make District 2 more attractive to people like them.
Well, I think being a progressive helps. I envision a St. Louis County that is equitable and has opportunity where all dreams can come true, where all kids someday will have the same education that my 2 kids have now in Parkway schools. And I am working hard, fighting every day against a status quo that wants to keep things the way they are, to ensure that we can continue to grow and progress, better educate our children, have better opportunities for them outside of school to develop new skills and relationships. And I think that, you know, taking on things like police reform and making sure that we're taking guns away from perpetrators of intimate violence and standing up for women's rights and equity across the board for people of color, I think that's what young people want. And I think I'm a voice for those progressive young families like mine. I have a 1st grader and a 3rd grader. And I think we all want a safer, better world for our children. And I am fighting for that every day.
Hey, Mr. Glantz.
I think to make the region more attractive for people starts with education. And it's quality public education from early childhood through high school, through college, through trade school, postgraduate studies. It's been shown that early childhood education significantly narrows the achievement and opportunity gap. And I think attracting new residents to the region starts with education.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to start with you, Mr. Glantz, this time. How will you increase the amount of affordable housing in District 2?
I think by expanding and working with the public-private partnership that has already been started in St. Louis County, I think fair and equitable building codes that promote home ownership and give people opportunities for home ownership, but make that affordable and accept the fact that not everybody can afford an expensive home. And so our housing options need to appeal to a broad base of potential home buyers. Also with that comes accountability with those public-private partnerships as well.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Dunaway?
I think we need to do a much better job of aligning our transportation systems, our housing systems, and places where people work to provide more housing that is near transportation that gets people to jobs. I think that we need to invest even more time, energy, and money into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund so that we can continue to fund developers, fund programs, and fund people to be able to build and provide more affordable housing. But I also think that it's a really big deal to admit that we have a problem here and that people can't afford to live in areas with good schools and with good access to transportation. And we need to do more. Yes, my opponent is right. Working with the private sector to ensure that we're all working collaboratively to get this housing, transportation, and job site piece pulled together. And I think that all starts and stops with a better investment in the affordable housing.
Your time is up. Speaking of building codes, and we'll start with you, Ms. Dunaway. A number of people who submitted questions noticed that maybe you and Mr. Glantz have a different position on the new building codes that were put into place. Can you tell us why those building codes are important or impeding development, and what you see in the future.
The reason the building codes are important is because when I came to office, St. Louis County was on a 2009 building code, and it was my objective to update those to a more modern building code. And we had a sample of that, but before I got there, all of the environmental protections and safety and efficiency standards had been pulled out by a group of people that consisted of builders and architects and people. It wasn't a diversity of opinions. And so when I came on board, it was really important to me as a champion for the environment to make sure that our champion of the environment had a seat at the table, and that our goals for a greener planet, for safer homes, for more efficient homes was baked into our building codes as a moral statement. And I stand strongly by this. We should be starting the negotiations for the 2019 building codes later this fall. And I'm looking forward to being the spokesperson for the environment in those negotiations as well.
Okay, Mr. Glantz.
As an architect, I understand and respect the importance of building codes. Building codes are the foundation of the industry and are of paramount importance to protecting lives and the safety of building occupants. The process, though, of updating building codes is highly involved with input from a wide array of stakeholders and should not be hijacked by politicians. I happen to believe that energy codes, while they're important, are not life safety issues. Interestingly enough, in the city of Creve Coeur, we recently updated our building codes after waiting to see what St. Louis County was going to do, and decided to include even more stringent energy codes than St. Louis County. While I disagree with that component, I listened to others and honored the process.
Okay, Mr. Glantz, we're going to start with you on a related question. A number of people have asked what you would do to decrease the carbon footprint in St. Louis County.
What I would do to decrease the carbon footprint, I think the energy code that's in the building code is a very good starting point and a guideline. But I don't think it should be mandated. I think if people want to choose that option for building, they should be allowed to do so, but it shouldn't be mandated. In the city of Creve Coeur, we have an energy and environment committee, a green committee. We're a tree city. We follow the energy and environment guidelines as much as possible. And we publish for people around the community guidelines for helping the environment. My own wife and daughter just recently started a garden in our own backyard, and including a composting component to that as well. So I believe that starts at home, and government, local officials are responsible for educating people about those opportunities.
Okay, Ms. Dunaway.
I believe in leading by example when it comes to protecting the environment. I'm raising a couple of social justice warriors who know which recycling bins to use. I took up the torch of the building codes because I'm a champion for the environment. I'm working on electric vehicle readiness legislation with Ameren and others. And before COVID hit, I was in the process of starting a green committee in St. Louis County, which would help to create a recycling program and incentives for employees to recycle and reduce and reuse things. Look, this is my jam right here, and I think there is so much we can do by leading in St. Louis County, by doing programs for Earth Day, and by involving the community and our constituents in the beautiful parts of being green and helping take care of our planet. And there's so much we can do. I've been in conversations with Sierra Club and many other organizations since I walked in the door, and we've got a lot of great stuff coming down the pike.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to start with you, Ms. Dunaway. Another issue that a number of your constituents is concerned about is the oversight of COVID-19 spending, particularly the money that the county executive has been involved in. So the question is, do you think that the oversight of this spending is adequate? If so, explain why. If not, what would you do in the future?
So I definitely think it's adequate because I chair the oversight committee and I spend a great deal of time every week in conversations with the county executive's office, reviewing what's happening at stlcorona.com and talking to the county executive about what the priorities are for us on the St. Louis County Council, as well as our constituents and the community leaders that are feeding back to both the county executive's office and my team to let us know where the priorities are and how best we can achieve these. Look, we spend so much time researching these issues, taking deeper dives, talking to community leaders, and making sure that the programs that we are putting in place are getting an adequate amount of funding into the right areas of public health, humanitarian, and economic rescue. And the reason we bypassed a county council approval for every expenditure is because these election year shenanigans have been in the way of good policy, good relationships, and good discussions all year long. And we could not see in a crisis like we're in.
Your time is up. Mr. Glantz.
My answer to that is a little different and a little more succinct. I believe vehemently important. Good governance always includes checks and balances and never relinquishes control to just one person, regardless of anyone's good intentions. I think it was a mistake for the county council to give the county executive oversight over that money.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Glantz, we're going to start with you this time. We're going to switch topics and talk about police reform. What is the first step that you would support to bring about real police reform to St. Louis County?
I think that's a great question, and I think it's a critically important issue for the greater St. Louis region. In Creve Coeur, our police department is held to the highest standards of accountability. I would like to see that countywide. I would also advocate for consistent policing standards and criteria throughout the county. I would insist on anti-bias training and de-escalation training for police officers. I would advocate the use of body cams. And I think it's of paramount importance that police department personnel should match the demographic makeup of the community that they serve.
Thank you. Ms. Dunaway.
I think the first thing we need to do is admit writ large that we have a systemic racism problem in our policing. This does not stop with the policing. I think we have this in every government and organization across the county and the country, frankly. And I think once we can admit that we have a problem, we can all work better, closely together to solve this. I think that we need to provide incentives for police officers to get the bad guys off the force. I think we need to put systems in place so that bad cops don't move from one district to another. I think we should have, I don't believe that the police unions should be the ones representing police officers accused of misconduct. And I think that we need to better collaborate with those who are actually trained and equipped to handle things like homelessness, domestic violence, drug addiction, by ensuring that we're working collaboratively with social workers in responding to those types of calls. We are dispatching police inappropriately.
Your time is up. Ms. Dunaway, you're first this time. What are two specific steps that you would take to encourage development in all of St. Louis County?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Okay. What two specific steps would you take to increase economic development in all of St. Louis County?
Well, I think number one, we need to be really serious about where we can reuse some old developments that are currently sitting and wasting away. I think there are a lot of opportunities that we can reinvest and be creative with some of those plots of land that are continuing to die. Secondly, I think that we need to really collaborate with the business community so that we can see where our greatest opportunities lie and ensure that we're getting resources to help them develop and expand and to find the right talent in order to grow and deliver better services and products.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Glantz?
I actually think we need to partner and collaborate with our educational institutions. We have some very, very fine educational facilities in Washington University, SLU, and many others. And I think we need to partner between business, education, and government to look for opportunities. We started to do that in Creve Coeur with the 39 North Innovation District, which is a partnership of Creve Coeur, Olivet, Bayer, the Danforth Center, and the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership. We need to look for those opportunities throughout the greater St. Louis region in underserved areas as well, and partnering with a three-legged stool, government, business, and education, I think will serve our purposes very, very well.
Okay, Mr. Glantz, you're first, and we're changing topics. Two people asked that we get your thoughts on increasing diversity in both appointments to commissions and also minority contracts. So could you give us your thoughts on how you would increase those?
I think it's critically important. And I have done so in Creve Coeur. You know, in Creve Coeur in the late 50s, early 60s, we took some land from a Black family by eminent domain when the real issue was that the neighbors didn't want a Black family moving into the community. For the first time in 60 years, the city of Creve Coeur owned our history, and I helped facilitate that. But owning a history and changing the name of the park isn't enough. I also appointed a task force to look for ways to help educate the community, to tell the true narrative of that story and what we can learn from it. I can't change the racial practices of the past, but I can ensure that the future is better. I've done it in Creve Coeur. I would do it in St. Louis County as well.
Okay, Ms. Dunaway?
I think it's a matter of outreach. We need to ensure that we are reaching out to every corner of St. Louis County to find those people who are interested in serving and recruiting them to come join one of our boards and commissions. And then not just giving them a seat at the table, but ensuring that their voice is heard on a regular basis. I think we need to do this not just in our boards and commissions. We need to do this across St. Louis County government and across all of our organizations and businesses in the St. Louis region. We still live in a segregated world, and until we do more to provide more opportunities to people from marginalized communities, the cycle of systemic racism and all of the systems that perpetrate it are going to carry on as they are. And the only way to defeat that is to get more voices at the table, unique voices, diverse voices, people of color, women, people like me with disabilities. We need to make sure that all people have a voice in how we run our government.
Okay, Ms. Dunaway, a related question. We had two people ask what the county can do to decrease least discrimination in terms of source of income. In other words, you know, when somebody says that they've got a Section 8 voucher, they feel like they're going to get discriminated against. What can the county do about that?
Well, we can make that illegal. We can pass a county ordinance that prohibits that type of question and behavior.
Okay, Mr. Glantz.
I don't know enough about that subject, but I would tend to agree that there should be ordinances that sort of behavior not only is unacceptable, but illegal.
Okay, Mr. Glantz, you're next. A number of people want to know, particularly with the announcements by school districts today, what the county can do to help the reopening of schools be safe.
Well, I'm not sure that that's a county function. I think that's more a school district function. My wife happens to serve on the Ladue School Board, and I know that they've met extensively trying to figure out how to best educate children in a safe environment. I think the school districts are better equipped to educate our children and know what the best means are for doing so than county government.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Dunaway?
I do believe that county government has a role. We have $173.5 million in CARES money, and I would like to see a portion of that going to help bridge the gap between kids in underserved communities and kids like mine, who at least have been able to stay with things throughout. I have a first grader and a third grader starting school in a month, and I have no idea what I'm going to do. The options I have in front of me are terrifying to me. And I think about that every day when I'm making decisions in the county, when I'm thinking about my constituents, and when I see these options in front of me. And I try to figure out what more we can do, and making sure that all kids in the county have some way to connect to school, whether that's at school or at home, ensuring that they're fed and that they can safely remain in their homes, and giving them the tools and the resources to be able to stay connected and continue their education is a priority for me.
Okay, thank you. You get to go again with a related question. A number of people are really concerned about quality, safe, and affordable childcare. What initiatives would you support on that?
Well, right now I'm working with an organization called Ready by 5, and they are looking to put a tax increase on the ballot in November. I know it's a challenging time to be thinking about tax increases and asking people to invest more money, but the reality is our early childhood education system is on the brink of collapse. It is completely unaffordable, even for people as lucky as me to have a good income. It was a struggle when my kids were little, and I don't know how most parents in St. Louis County are making ends meet, especially now with the healthcare issues in play. I think that we need to do a much better job of providing cradle to college education through the public school system. And I think that we can start right here in St. Louis County by passing this tax and getting our tax dollars hard at work, providing an opportunity for all kids in St. Louis County to get a head start before they get to school.
Okay, Mr. Glantz.
I believe the value of childcare in preschool is very, very important to children. I think it's important that that daycare include an educational component to ensure that every child is kindergarten ready, that they don't enter kindergarten behind. I think early childhood education has been shown to, as I mentioned earlier, to significantly narrow the achievement and opportunity gap. And I think it's very, very important that St. Louis County take a lead in that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Glantz, you're next on this question. What do you think the most important challenge District 2 has, and what would you do about it?
Right now, it's COVID-19 funding. The budgets, as I've talked to community leaders throughout District 2, our municipal budgets have been devastated by the effects of the St. Louis County shutdown. And I think we need to find ways to get people back to work. We need to find ways to get kids back to school. We need to find ways to reinvigorate our community. We're going to have to do that collaboratively, working with elected officials across the board and finding science-based solutions, the COVID-19 problem, that actually accommodate the needs of working families across St. Louis County.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Dunaway?
I agree that the most pressing issue right now is COVID-19. We are in the middle of a public health crisis. People are losing their lives. People are losing their jobs. People are going hungry. And the first and only thing we need to do is keep our people fed, make sure that they are being able to stay in their homes through funding for housing assistance and mortgage assistance, homebound care. We need to make sure that our kids get fed. We need to make sure that their parents can put some food on the table. We need to make sure that we have enough testing so that people can get tested and we can contact trace anyone that they've been in contact with so that we can get this illness under control. It is once we get the illness under control, then we can go back to figuring out what it is that we need to do next. But right now, my job as your councilwoman is to take care of our people.
Okay, Ms. Dunaway. The question is, and it's a different kind of question, but it comes from the question and answer box. Do you support Prop C that's on the ballot about charter changes? Why do we need them?
Well, so the Charter Commission gets together once a decade, and they go through the charter, and it's a year-long process. They meet weekly. There's lots of public engagement. So this is the result of that year-long process. And what they discovered was that there were a lot of, there was some old language that really doesn't fit with the modern world. And I think what it does is it cleans up discrepancies between old laws and modern governing, for one thing. And for another, it puts a process in place for how to move on from a county executive that, goes to prison or leaves for some other reason. I plan to vote yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Glantz?
I tend to agree that it clears up some language, and I support that amendment.
Okay, Mr. Glantz, you're next. And I want everybody to know there's hope here. We only have a couple of questions left. Mr. Glantz, what's the biggest mistake you made in your public life, and what did you do about it?
My biggest mistake happened, that's a great question. I really admire somebody for asking that question. My biggest mistake was when I ran for mayor in the very first time, and my opponent did not file a financial disclosure in a timely manner. And instead of discussing that directly with my opponent, I chose another avenue, and it was probably rather political in nature and not a very nice and neighborly thing to do. Our municipalities, I think, are a strength in St. Louis County. And I wish I had been able to set aside politics and be a better neighbor.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Dunaway?
I think I underestimated the political power of the status quo. When I took on that piece of legislation for the building codes, I had no idea that people that liked things the way they were going to come after me so strongly with everything they had. I thought I was doing the right thing by sticking up for the environment and ensuring safety and efficiency standards in our building codes. And I am still, to this day, amazed at what's been thrown back at me because of that. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it again, but I might have played a little nicer in the sandbox from the get-go. And I learned a really big lesson in that bringing all the voices to the table can really help everyone get someplace where we can agree, even if we're not all happy at the end of the day. And that was a powerful learning experience for me, and I'm grateful I had that experience.
Okay, last question before your 1-minute closing statements. And it's this. Many people look at the St. Louis County Council as very partisan and contentious. Why are you the best person to make it less partisan and allow that council to work together for the good of the county?
Is that for me? Sorry.
Yes, it is.
So I understand that people have this impression that the county council is partisan, but 90% of what we do passes 7-0. It's those big issues, those big things that make for big change that the status quo doesn't like. And I think you should vote for me because I'm on the progressive majority and I'm here to lead us into the change. I want to lead us into and through the change. And we need to change. The status quo is only working for a small percentage of us. And we need for our government to work for everyone.
Hey, thank you. Mr. Glantz.
For 28 years, I have served my community in a nonpartisan manner. For the first time, I have been asked to select a political party to run this campaign for County Council District 2. But I will maintain, I feel strongly that I will support some core democratic values but I am a candidate who has for 28 years that I have done this and I shall continue to. And that's why I will continue to legislate with a steady hand. And my experience in local government makes me eminently prepared for this position.
Okay, thank you. So we are going to now have the closing statements, and they're 1 minute. Mr. Glantz, you're going to start.
Thank you very much. And again, thanks for having me tonight. My father was the first volunteer building commissioner in Creve Coeur, and he taught me the importance of giving back to your community, which I have done for 28 years. I am proud to carry on his legacy. I want you to know that I will honor the St. Louis County Charter and will always put the best interests of my constituents first. I also believe and will uphold values of the Democratic Party, including marital rights and sexual preference are not the responsibility of elected officials, and all citizens, regardless of race, gender, or sexual preference, deserve equal rights. In addition, access to quality public education from early childhood through college, vocational postgraduate studies is a vital component to productive citizens, and medical decisions should be made by patients and their doctors. I will work collaboratively to promote these values. Voters have a choice to continue to accept the status quo or to vote for Barry Glantz on August 4th, 2020, someone who will stand up for what is right.
Your time is up. Thank you, Mr. Glantz. Ms. Dunaway.
You know, one of the great things about the upcoming election is that our voters have a real choice between a return to status quo government or sticking with the one that has the power, momentum, and hope to be truly transformative. I see St. Louis County much as I see America, as a place where dreams can come true. I see a people bound by the values of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I see St. Louis County and beyond as a land long overdue for a reckoning with a past that makes our core values a hypocrisy. I believe we are better after this reckoning, and I am here to lead us through it. Thank you so much for having me tonight, Maryland Heights and Creve Coeur Townships, and thank you, League of Women Voters, for yet another great candidate forum.
Thank you very much, and thank our candidates. And you see, you can get through a lot of issues and answer things well in 1 minute. So we're grateful, and I think all of us have learned a lot. We're going to take a breath here and then move to the County Executive Forum. So thank you very much to our candidates. Hope you'll stick around, and we're going to move to the next forum. We have everybody here. Dr. Page, Ms. Tolivar, looking here, Mr. Zimmerman, Mr. Manavani, there you are. Got everybody? Okay. Well, for those of you, I think most people were around for the first forum. So you know that what we're going to do is have each candidate give a 2-minute opening statement, and then we have a whole lot of questions that have been submitted, and we're going to go through as many of those as we can. So each candidate, starting with Mr. Zimmerman, who's first on the ballot, will give a 2-minute opening statement. Then I will ask questions, and I'm going to rotate so that not everybody is first all the time. And then we're going to have 1-minute closing statements. So with that in mind, let's start with you, Mr. Zimmerman, and your opening statement. You need to unmute your mic.
There we go. You'd think I would know by now. Thank you so much. This is a terrible moment that our region finds itself in the middle of. The twin pandemics of institutional racism afflicting this county and the broader St. Louis area. And of course, this virus, which kills and which does not kill indiscriminately. And let's face it, it kills people who don't look like me at a rate about 4 times as it kills people who look like me. And we have a choice. We have a choice of whether we want to stick with the kind of leadership that has gotten us into this mess, the kind of leadership that has got us a police chief who denies that racism even exists in her department, the kind of leadership that covers up problems at the St. Louis County Jail rather than admitting there's a problem and trying to address it, the kind of leadership that had COVID-19 testing available in places like Chesterfield and De Pere 2 months before it was available where people were dying. This is a terrible moment. This is a moment when we must recommit ourselves to do better. If what you want is the same old, if what you want is the good old boys club and the powerful corporate interests controlling your county government, you have plenty of good choices in this race. But what if you want real reform, real change, moving ourselves in a direction where we take advantage of the opportunity from this crisis to finally heal some of the deep wounds that afflict this region, then my name is Jake Zimmerman. I've spent a career in public life fighting to reform institutions that stubbornly resist reform, fighting for accountability, fighting for transparency, fighting for the people against the powerful special interests. This is a moment where this community desperately needs, and I believe is ready for that fight. And that's why I'm so proud to be in this race and so happy to be here with you tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Page, you're next.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to be here and to speak with you. I'm Dr. Sam Page, and I'm running to be your county executive. This is a precarious moment for all of us, and the person you choose to be county executive will be making life or death decisions. And that's not hyperbole, that's a fact. So having both a medical degree and experience in municipal, county, and state government has been an enormous asset in dealing with COVID over the past 6 months. And of course, my first priority is to keep you safe. And we are in unprecedented times, and this election is about weighing promises versus accomplishments. And during this debate, we'll be talking about issues that matter today: restoring trust and accountability in county government, surviving a pandemic, and recognizing and addressing the concerns of the Black Lives Matter movement. My office has released an annual report that goes over some of the progress we've made in the 15 months since I became county executive. We've accomplished a great many things, including raising the minimum wage in county jobs to $15 an hour, expanding paid sick leave and family leave, helping families stay in their homes through an affordable housing trust fund, and implementing prevailing wage. We've provided anti-bias training for police officers from the first years to the top brass. And every decision we've made is through an equity lens, and that won't change if I'm elected. Bottom line, I'm committed to building a St. Louis County that is healthier, safer, and more equitable. And my record as county executive demonstrates just that. And I think these are your goals too. It'll take all of us working together towards a shared vision to make St. Louis the place we all want it to be again. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to your questions, and I'd be honored to earn your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Toliver. Ms. Toliver?
Yes.
You're up.
Can you hear me? Great. So, hi, good evening. Welcome. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. So again, my name is Jamie Toliver. I definitely have a lot of concerns for the county. It's again, my goal is not to say what someone else is doing wrong. My goal is not to say what someone else is not going to commit to. However, my goal is to make sure that I am speaking for the people of the county. I've made it a point this entire election to make sure that I am speaking with the councilmen, the aldermen, the mayors, and the residents of the various municipalities that I seek to lead, to see what the major concerns of these places are, what the major concerns of these cities are, and what it is that I can absolutely do. I think that it is one thing to make promises, is another thing to say what has already been done, in a sense where it assumes that everyone was already pleased with what has been going on. I believe that I am indeed and I'm not saying this as a per se, but I am an absolute vision of things that are progressing and changing for the county, for Missouri as a whole. To be the first female elected in this position, I think that it would say an enormous amount. I definitely believe that I have worked in public and human services to include health and education in my lifetime. And so I have a great deal of knowledge to bring to the table, but I also come as a resident of the county that I seek to serve. And the pillars of my entire platform are communication and education, because I believe without either, we are a house that will fall. I would appreciate your vote on August 4th as well. And I welcome your questions this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Manavani?
Good evening, Kathleen. Thank you all for inviting me. I'm Mark Manavani, Democratic candidate for St. Louis County Executive. Many of you know me as I was the only Democrat with the resolve to mount a campaign against a corrupt incumbent a couple of years ago. You know a little bit about my career, I think. I've been a lawyer and a teacher and a coach and an entrepreneur and a successful business executive. I've created economic jobs and growth unlike anybody else in this campaign. I don't aspire to having a big fancy political career beyond service to St. Louis County. I'll seek no other office besides this one. I aspire only to providing the kind of leadership our community needs to achieve its potential in the coming days. It's no secret why I'm seeking this office. I believe that our region in general and St. Louis County in particular are dying. If you want to be an optimist, you might be able to say that they are in decline, are stagnating. But as a practical matter, over the course of the past decades, some of which have been led by two of my principal opponents in this race, our community has declined in almost every variable. Our segregation is up, our crime is up, our economic output is down, our population is down, and they come to us and ask us for more opportunities to create the change that they haven't created up to now. I think that the people in St. Louis County recognize that if we're going to create a better community, we have to change. I'm the only person here with an economic plan that will create growth in our community. I'm the only person who isn't a career politician, who doesn't see this office as a pathway to other opportunities, and who has the potential to unite our community in a very special way. Business and labor, black and white, progressive and conservative, Democrats and Republicans, North County, South County, Central, and beyond. And so consequently, I think we have the opportunity.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Mr. Manavani, thank you. Dr. Page, we're going to start the first question with you. And the question is, what's the most important role of county executive?
Well, the most important role of county executive is to identify the complex problems in the community and convene all of the stakeholders to address these problems, to be a good listener, and to make sure that everyone at the table is participating in a sincere effort. That means that we have to address institutional structural racism in our community. And every time we have a complex question in front of us, we need to ask ourselves, is race a factor in this question? And if it is, it has to be out on the table right away. But the county executive is a leader. The county executive's responsibility is to work with elected officials in the county, elected officials of our regional counties or other jurisdictions, and to address the most complex problems that we have. COVID-19 is a perfect example. We've worked in a coordinated way with St. Louis City and our other regional partners in a very coordinated public health response.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Tolliver, you're next.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Tolliver?
Yes. Sorry. So I absolutely believe that the number one role of the county executive is leadership, but in leadership there is service. I think that the idea of leading does not start with a God complex that says, I know what's best for you, but it results with a partnership that says, I am with you, and that I stand for you. I speak with you, not for you. I think that communication, again, is very important part of what it is to be a leader, and it's to say, I'm going to stand in service to you as the community to make sure that what it is that you need done gets done in a way that is both advantageous to your community and the community at large.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Manavani, you're next.
Thank you, Kathleen. Agreed. The fundamental responsibility of the county executive is to be the leader of St. Louis County. So the job requires one who understands and has demonstrated excellent leadership skills in the past. It's an executive level position. And so an understanding of what an executive does and what those responsibilities are and how an executive goes about his daily responsibilities is important. Leadership springs from within a person. It's from one's values, one's vision, one's character, and one's ability to communicate from the sum of their life's experiences. I believe I have built and led an enterprise and reflected those values throughout my career. And I think that those qualities have been lacking in executive level leadership across St. Louis County for many decades.
Okay, Mr. Zimmerman.
The job of the county executive is to lead, and real leadership is precisely what's been in critically short supply in St. Louis County, not just because of the despicable corruption of Steve Stenger, but because of a history of backroom deals, pay-to-play politics, and the same sort of political shenanigans that we've seen for far too long. What this region could use is leadership that has the guts not to stick a finger in the wind to try and figure out what's right to think based on the polling this year, but rather leaders who have the courage of their convictions, leaders who know what they think and are prepared to act on it. And in particular, the kind of leadership we need right now in these moments of crisis is not the sort of leadership that tries to kick the can down the road, not the sort of leadership that thinks another study is the solution to problems right in front of our nose, but rather the kind of leadership with the guts to get to work and take action. Whether it's a police chief who denies that racism is real, whether it's a pandemic that this region has responded to slowly and ineffectively, that's why we need leadership.
Time is up. Ms. Tolliver, we're going to go to you first this next time, and a number of people asked this question. What specific steps would you take to bring real police reform?
I think that the absolute first step would be to look at the police officers and their abilities to do their job as it stands right now. So I think that one of the very first things to do would be to make sure that the police officers are educated in what it is that they need to do, and then to make sure that all those that do not meet certain qualifications are then placed on leave or asked to take a different role in the police officer unit. I think that another thing that they should absolutely do is to make sure that police officers are certified in sensitivity training, and that they undergo some sort of a psychiatric evaluation, and that they are educated on the history of police, so they know why they do what they do for the county, so they understand what protect and serve actually means.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Manavani, you're next.
Thank you. Look, policing is changing all across America, and it is important that the St. Louis County Police recognize that and embrace it. My conversations with them indicate that they recognize these things and that they're willing to embrace the evolution into a new type of policing. I found no resistance among the rank and file police with respect to any of that. They favor strong accountability for bad cops. They favor de-escalation training, as do I. They recognize the increasing importance of having sociologists and social workers at their side when they deal with issues that really don't involve criminality. They recognize the need for anti-bias training and records access. And the bottom line is we have to create trust between the community and the police. And that is the key difference between me and some of my opponents here in this election.
Mr. Zimmerman.
I somewhat disagree with the premise of the question. What we need is not reform. What we need is transformation. What we need is real vision. I'm the only candidate in this race who's had the guts to put a detailed plan for police accountability on my website for everyone in the community to see. And I won't bore you with a recitation of a dozen bullet points here, but I would encourage everyone to go and look at it and see for yourself who has the real vision to tackle these problems, because the problems go deeper than just the St. Louis County Police Department. They go deeper than leadership with its head in the sand, with a police chief who denies that racism is even a real thing, What we need is transformation of policing in this whole region. What we need to do is take people out of the mass incarceration system who have no business being there. We need to fight and end the school to prison pipeline. We need to end the abomination that is the Muni Shuffle. We need to create the kind of law enforcement community and response in the broader St. Louis area where guns and batons are the last resort, not the first choice.
Time is up. Dr. Page.
Thank you. I think first of all, we need to recognize that our police here are here to keep us safe in our community, and they can do so with protecting civil rights and recognizing the mainstay of community policing. Police reform is one and the same of criminal justice reform. We've been doing that in our county jail since I became county executive. We've been working on the police department since I became county executive. A year ago, I requested and asked for police cameras to be available on dash cams and on all police officers. That's happened in St. Louis County, and that was transformative. We need a complete top to bottom review of our county police department. We do a good job in St. Louis County, but we can always be better. This is a continuous quality improvement project. This doesn't mean we don't continue to make improvements based on past information. This means we take a deep dive and see where we can do better. And I know that we can. I'm glad that Lieutenant Colonel Troy Doyle has been assigned to lead this review, and I have great expectations for what this will bring us.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Manavani, we're going to start with you this time. Do you support diverting some funds for police and the jails to social services? Why or why not?
Yeah, I don't. I support the need to add to our investment in human capital and into our social needs. I don't believe it's appropriate at this point to remove dollars from policing. We have a serious violent crime problem in St. Louis County. The number of homicides that the St. Louis County Police deal with has doubled over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. Violent crime is always rated as one of the highest worries for people in St. Louis County. We have to retrain our police. We have to invest in them further. I think more enlightened policing is going to be more expensive, not less expensive. And so I don't believe that we should be reducing the investment in our police force, but I do believe that we have to find the resources in order to invest in our other social needs.
Thank you. Mr. Zimmerman.
I don't believe that any serious candidate in this race supports defunding the police, but I do think that in this moment where we're about to enter what is very likely a fiscal crisis in St. Louis County government, it is appropriate to ask hard questions about how we spend our resources. And in particular, I see many opportunities to ask tough questions about whether, for example, the scourge of drug addiction is a crime first and a public health problem second, or the other way around. And I think there are many instances in this community where we could save money and save lives and have better outcomes across this community if we choose not to respond to every situation with law enforcement first.
Thank you. Dr. Page.
So I don't support defunding the police, but I do support reorganizing the police department, the services they provide, and who provides those services. And that's why I want a top to bottom review with an eye on community policing and civil rights. We could embed social workers and nurses in the police department to respond to some of these calls. Some of these are mental health problems. Some of these are substance abuse problems, best handled by someone who is not necessarily trained in a law enforcement. The other question about defunding the jail, our jail runs on a tight budget, and we have to have the funding for a jail to take care of the people who are in our custody. We owe them the dignity of good and responsible care, good healthcare services, and fair treatment. And we couldn't do that if we reduced the budget in the jail.
Ms. Tolliver.
Thank you. So I would actually have to agree in some ways with Dr. Page in the idea of, I don't think defunding has ever been a thing. I've never agreed with the idea of defunding, but reallocation of the fund is an absolute must. I definitely think that some of the police calls that are answered are not criminal calls, and the police should not be the ones to respond to everything. So if it takes to reallocate some of the funds to make sure that social workers respond, that drug addiction counselors respond, that child services responds to the appropriate things, then I think that is absolutely something that should be done. And I would absolutely agree that that is something that should happen and should have been happening for a very long time. I think that if we educate our community and give the youth and those that are now considered to be criminals, if we give them education and things to do and jobs and employment, I think that the criminal rate will go down significantly. We should not have more police because that just means that more people are being locked up. So I think that we should absolutely just reallocate the funds.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Zimmerman, and we're going to start with you this time. And a number of people are concerned about the county justice center and the county jail. And they say that there's been a COVID outbreak there. There's been the use of tasers that they questioned there. There have been unexplained deaths of inmates. What specific initiatives would you start right away to push along a review and reform of the jail?
What's happening at the county jail is deeply troubling. It's not just the use of tasers. In one case, we are told that an inmate was tased 5 times while guards attempted to restrain him. But worse, what then happened was the cover-up. What happened after that was that the report was written, promptly buried, no disciplinary action taken, nothing happened at all until word leaked to the media. And that's the really disturbing trend at this jail. 6 prisoners dead in the space of the past 2 years. And in more than one instance, the administration has flat out lied to the public about what happened. The response must not be another study. The response must be action and accountability now. We are judged by how we treat the least among us, and a sentence to incarceration in the county jail ought not be a death sentence. No more of the political cronyism, no more of giving your buddies no work jobs at the jail. Let's get to work fixing this problem, and let's start telling the public the truth.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Page?
Thank you. One of the first things I encountered when I became county executive was a rash of deaths in the jail and really some alarming processes there. And we went to work on it right away. We reconvened the Criminal Justice Advisory Council and appointed some of our sharpest critics to that cause. We initiated new training with nurses and corrections officers. We eliminated millions of dollars in fees. We stopped the practice of shackling pregnant women. We've provided free menstrual services. We have completely reorganized the priorities and the services that are provided in the jail, because I do believe that we have a responsibility to the folks that are in our custody. Many of them have substance abuse problems. Many of them have mental health problems. And we have a very active infirmary in the jail. I've had video cameras installed so we can have video to review some of the incidents that have been described. Unfortunately, they've been exaggerated for political purposes, but we've made a lot of progress.
Ms. Tolliver.
Thank you. I definitely found it also very disturbing that the people who have already been jailed for their alleged crimes that are coming up with the COVID and deaths and the assaults that are happening in the prisons, and very much like County Assessor Zimmerman said, a lot of it is being covered up unnecessarily, and it is not until it hits the media, it's not until it becomes a huge media outrage that something is said or done or something is brought to light. And I think that it's far too often that these things happen within our county jails. And I definitely think County Page is on the Dr. Page is on the right track with the idea that nurses and social workers and things should be on staff. They should be on deck, and they should be in the prisons very much in the same way that the funds should be reallocated on the police force. I think the same thing should happen in prison. They have already been arrested. They should be safe in jail amongst those who are charged to protect and serve.
Thank you. Mr. Manavani.
Thank you. Look, this is clearly a dysfunctional department right now. We still have people dying. I think we have multiple departments involved. We've got the Justice Services Department. We've got the Health Department. We don't have a doctor in place. It seems to me we don't have a doctor running the Health Department. I don't know exactly what the specific issue is, but the fact of the matter is that this is not being well run today, and people are dying on our watch. It's the responsibility of the county to take care of these people, to treat them humanely, to see to their health needs, and it's not happening. And so we can talk about all the committees that we need, but it's not being done. Somebody needs to take responsibility and fix it, and that's what an executive would do.
Thank you. Dr. Page, we're going to start with you. And a number of people have asked, given the situation we're in general and with the jail and other problems, what specific action would you take to strengthen the effectiveness of the county health department?
Well, first of all, we focused the COVID response out of our health department, which is one of the premier health departments in the Midwest, not just in Missouri. We've directed almost $50 million of this relief fund for testing to increase the services they provide in the community, partnerships with our federally qualified health centers. Again, like every complex problem in my administration, always with an eye on equity, always with an eye on putting the resources where they're needed the most. For example, as soon as St. Louis County was able to purchase tests for COVID-19 in a national environment where almost no one could purchase tests, as soon as we could, we deployed those tests to North County. And we will continue to make sure that we focus the services of public health where they're needed the most in North County and in our clinic in South County that is near Limay. The health department is robust, it's strong. We have great staff that work cooperatively with all of our regional partners in the other surrounding counties and within the city of St. Louis.
Thank you. Ms. Tolliver.
Thank you. So I think that I applaud our healthcare heroes and what they have been able to do thus far. But very much like everything else, that the idea that there are people that are running for this seat as now is to say that there are things that could be done better. I think one of the things that absolutely could be done, which goes to my two platforms that are education and communication, is that we should look at the areas, the cities, the countries that are doing things better than how we are, and we should make sure that we are following all of the necessary codes, all of the necessary ordinances, all of the necessary routines that will put us in a better situation than where we are right now, because there are definitely things that could be done better, period. It doesn't mean that things are being done wrong. It just means that things could stand to be adjusted, they can be regulated, and they can otherwise be made to be better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Manavani.
Kathleen, would you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Given the situation we're in and the importance of public health, what can we do to strengthen the county public health department?
Well, I think the first thing we have to look to is whether the leadership of the health department is acting effectively, whether it has performed well in this pandemic situation. In my view, the health department has failed to communicate effectively with the community. I think it has tried its best to follow the counsel of the CDC, but its level of communication and its ability to bring the community along with it has, I think, been poor. I think the level of integration with the city has been atrocious. And I think that the health department of the city and the health department of the county ought to be able to collaborate a lot more effectively than they have. We've had different rules at work in both places. And I think the health department hasn't worked well with the municipalities at all. Everywhere I go around St. Louis County, the mayors and the people in the municipalities tell me.
Your time is up, Mr. Manavani. Thank you. Ms. Tolliver, this next question is for you. And it's
Kathleen, were you going to let me answer that?
Oh, I'm sorry, Jake.
That's all right.
I'm very sorry.
That's quite all right. And I'll echo, since Mark was getting cut off, I'm going to echo what he was saying there at the end, because I think he's dead right. The lack of coordination with the municipal leaders in this community. I also hear that again and again from mayors and city council members. And it's so disappointing. And it really does suggest that the current leadership of the health department is in over their heads. That may explain why at the same time as the city of St. Louis was doing the responsible thing and opening parks as safe outdoor spaces when everything else was being closed down, the county health department waffled and at first went the other direction, closing parks at the same time as adult bookstores remained open. I am troubled by the lack of leadership there, but if you really want to fix what's wrong with our public health response, another good start would be to stop diverting our public health dollars away from critical healthcare needs and towards slush funds for political cronies, which is what this administration has done.
Hey, Ms. Tolliver, you are next in this next question. And it is, what's the most important thing that you have learned during the COVID-19 crisis that would guide your action if you were elected county executive?
I think the most important thing I learned during this entire COVID crisis is that you can't really trust Washington to have all of the answers. It is definitely something that you need to look to who has who is producing results, who has made progress, who is doing things such that their curve is slacking or dipping, or that their numbers have gone away. And then you do have to look at some of the statistics to say what was their population like when the crisis started, and what moves did they make. So I definitely think that education again and communication with the people, the places, and the things that are doing things right. Illinois seems to have gotten things right, and I think that St. Louis City has actually gotten things right in a lot of ways. So I think that communicating with our brother and sister cities would be an absolute thing to do to help to make sure that our going forward that we get a handle on this COVID crisis.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Manavani.
Well, first of all, I've learned a lot about how to protect oneself. I've been wised up. I've learned to gear up and to clean up and to split up and to ease up, which pretty much tells us how we've all tried to survive this past few months. But beyond that, I've been reminded of what good leadership looks like. Good leadership collaborates with people who are affected by decisions. Good leaders collaborate with business people if their decisions are affecting business people, with parents if their decisions are affecting kids, with other members of the community when those decisions are affecting them. It's necessary to collaborate. Good leaders don't act like Moses and go to the top of the mountain to bring down the 10 Commandments. They work with people in order to sell people on the outcome once it's decided. They build coalitions. And that's a reminder for me. And I think we've seen the consequences when it's not applied.
Okay. Mr. Zimmerman, you're next.
The critical lesson from this terrible pandemic should be that we're all in this thing together. If we want to get anything out of this, if we want to rise above it to become something bigger than what we have been, then we need to make this moment one where shared sacrifices turn into something that breaks past the silly polarization of this moment, the nonsense and dysfunction from Washington, D.C. and Jefferson City. You know, I have a son who's almost 6. He's due to start kindergarten this fall, and I desperately want him to go back to school and to start kindergarten. But I can't just think about what I want for my family and what I want for him. I got to think about the safety of his peers, his fellow classmates, including some of those who may hail from different parts of the community and may not have the same opportunities and blessings and privilege that he has. I have to think about not just the safety of the teachers, but of the folks sweeping the floors in those school buildings. We're all in this together, and we've got to be capable of rising above it if we want to make.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Page.
Well, first and foremost, we have to recognize the role of county government, especially in an emergency, is to protect the health and welfare of everyone in the community. There are divergent goals and divergent interests, but we have to keep focused on that piece more than anything. And that means good communication and good regional cooperation. Communication to let people know what they need to do to be safe and protect their loved ones. and communication to let people know what to expect. And we've also learned the value of social distancing, the value of masking. And that's why we have mandatory masks in St. Louis County, because we know that if we can get masking widely adopted, then we have a chance to slow the spread of the virus and then limit the impact on restrictions on social mixing. I've certainly learned how difficult it can be when we have to make those tough decisions, those tough calls that people are afraid to have an opinion about, but certainly quick to second guess when looking back on them with new information. Being a leader in the middle of an emergency, in the middle of a pandemic, is certainly a real challenge.
Thank you. Mr. Zimmerman, we're going to start with you this time. And the question is, what would be your first priority in helping small businesses as this crisis continues?
Small businesses are hurting, and I'm scared to death about what's going to happen when the PPP runs out, given the uneven and slipshod result from our national government. And it's critically important that we get people back to work as quickly and safely as possible. But to do that means spending the money the right way and not the wrong way. We got $170 million from the federal government, and this administration's first move was to siphon 10% off the top. They call it small business relief, but what it really is a $2.5 million slush fund to each county council member to buy their silence on the subject of appropriations authority. So small businesses can get that money, but if and only if they get approved by their council member. That's political patronage. It's the worst sort of ward healing politics that I had thought we were past, at least here in St. Louis County. So when I am county executive, we will follow the science and we will follow the urgent and critical needs in this community. And if that chaps some political hides, so be it. I'm not here to do political favors for anyone. I'm here to do what's right.
Thank you. Dr. Page.
Thank you. It's certainly fascinating to hear a small business relief program referred to as a slush fund, but we are in a political season. The small businesses who qualify, I'm sure, are happy to receive the help. In fact, we've decided as a county and as a council to provide these resources, 10% of the COVID relief funds, to all the small businesses who have applied and can demonstrate a need. In addition, we've been recognized by the 3 bonding agencies for our rapid response to COVID, for freezing non-emergency spending, and for early stay-at-home orders, which put us on the right track to rebound. We have to recognize that a good economic response is a good public health response to COVID, because everything will be built on how well we protect lives and protect our community and move through COVID in an organized manner instead of a haphazard manner. We also have an economic rescue team led by Rick Stevens, the CEO of Christian Hospital, who will organize the economic response as well.
Thank you. Ms. Tolliver.
Thanks. So I think that definitely figuring out which small businesses did receive the funds, but also figuring out in what ways we can service the other small businesses, because I think that there's absolutely no reason why St. Louis County cannot come together and help these small businesses, whether it be a job fair or whether there be a community organized effort to raise funds for these organizations, because honestly, if it is a small business that's within that community, I am so sure that the community in and of itself wants to see those companies strive, and they want to see them prosper, and they want to see the economy come back in their own regard, especially in places like North County or in other areas of West County where the small businesses are the heart of those communities. I think that as an executive leader, I think that we could figure out where we can be of service to those organizations with our funds, but also where we can help the community to organize rallies where they can also contribute to their own.
Okay, your time is up. Mr. Manavani?
Well, the first thing that should have happened with respect to small business is there should have been reasonable communication with them. Small businesses that I talk to every day, and a lot of them, felt totally left out of the process from the beginning. And that was disrespectful and puts business owners in a horrible position, not knowing what to tell their employees, not knowing what to tell their customers, not knowing whether they're going to be able to reopen or not. Secondly, before we take any victory laps around the idea of the way this money was apportioned to small businesses, the small business people that I talked to were appalled by the inconsistencies and inefficiencies and the absurdity of the process, which was changing over the course of the weeks. It was a kangaroo court process from day one. Both county council people and business people agree on this, and to act like this was somehow a great success is really a rewrite of every story that I've heard around the program. You have to understand business people if you're going to do this.
Your time is up, Mr. Mantovani. Dr. Page, we're going to start with you for this next question. And that is, and this came up a little bit before, people are saying, look, the county is in trouble. Our population is stagnating. Jefferson County and St. Charles County are growing. What will you do to grow this county?
Well, I think first of all that we have to recognize that the challenges in St. Louis County are rooted in decisions related to systemic racism that go back decades. And for the county to grow, we need to grow all of our region. And we have to recognize and deal with economic and racial segregation that's plagued us in every decision that we've made. This goes into economic opportunities, job opportunities, access to health care, public health across the board, and law enforcement. We all talk about this, but we have to recognize that systemic racism touches everything we do, and it's the root of all of our complex problems. And then it's about leadership. It's about economic development, making the economic development partnership together with the city of St. Louis work effectively, and not be not be a tool like it was for the previous county executive. We have to address, and we have to really, what we have to do is manage the COVID-19 crisis appropriately, responsibly, and move forward beyond that.
Thank you. Ms. Tolliver.
Thank you. So if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Education and communication are paramount to making sure that our city grows. If we can communicate with the various municipalities and areas and communities to see what it is that they need in their community, if we give some power back to the people who actually want and need these changes in their community, then by all means they would be more likely to represent their neighborhoods, represent their areas, and support and say, hey, come live here, come see what I see, live how I live. But I think that when we do have systemic racism, as Dr. Page has said, when we do have high crime rates, when we do not have a hold on our health situation, when our education system is faltering in many ways, it makes it a really hard sell. And as it was pointed out in a magazine article with the chairman of Centene, it becomes one of those property things.
Time is up. But thank you very much. Mr. Mantovani.
Economic development is the most fundamental challenge that we have as a region. The statistics about our decline are real, have been going on for decades. The current county executive, to the best of my knowledge, has made minimal effort, if any, with respect to rebuilding our economic development apparatus in the community. He should at least be connecting the dots between the regional chamber, the Economic Development Partnership, Civic Progress, the Regional Business Council, Alliance St. Louis, and the like. Each of these organizations is running on its own plan. There's no concerted activity whatsoever, and it's the county executive's responsibility to create and connect the dots along those lines. Secondly, you've got to distinguish between macro and micro economic development opportunities. We have to focus on North County as a microcosm. There's great things that we can do there to create growth, including UMSO and Jamestown Mall. And from a macroeconomic level, we've just got to get more aggressive, and we've got to get the county executive to be more effective in communicating the benefits of our community to others.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Zimmerman.
Boy, God knows Sam and I have our differences, but I really want to commend him for his answer to this question, because I think he hit the nail on the head. The original sin of the St. Louis region, and specifically of St. Louis County, is the Del Mar Divide. And it wasn't created by accident, and it wasn't created overnight. It came about intentionally. over the course of restrictive covenants in development in the World War II era and beyond, followed by choices about where to build interstate highways and where inherited home wealth would and would not accumulate. It is real. And if we want this region to move forward, we can keep burying our heads in the sand. We can keep being like this police chief who wants to deny that racism is real, or we can stare some of the hard facts in the face. We can look at the wake-up call given to us by Michael Neidorff with thousands of jobs going to North Carolina that should have been here. And we can commit ourselves to addressing this original sin, staring it in the face, and getting to work.
Okay, thank you. We're going to start with you this time, Ms. Tolliver. And the question is, how would you increase affordable housing in all parts of the county and decrease evictions?
So I think this is a really good question. I think that part of what would increase affordable housing is making the process for applying for home aid and relief, making that application process a little bit more accessible and easier to come by. I also think that making sure that, as it was said in the previous forum with the councilman, is the idea of making it against the law to discriminate against people of applying for affordable housing on the basis of whether or not they had Section 8 vouchers or not. I think that also making sure that we are looking at the lending practices of the apartment complexes or the home rentals or the home buyers associations. When we look at the practices and the policies of them, to make sure that they are indeed inclusive and make sure that everyone has an equal opportunity to actually have housing. I think that with the evictions, I think that is one of the things that we could do is to make sure that we actually give.
Thank you, Mr. Manavani.
Thank you. So this is the right place where we should be discussing the Delmar divide, not an economic development question, in my opinion. Housing is a basic right, and we are the 4th or 5th most segregated region in America. It is unconscionable and it's unacceptable. And affordable housing is a key to addressing those kinds of issues. First of all, the trust fund, which was enacted over the course of the last year, of which I'm a supporter, needs to be funded more effectively. It's not funded effectively at all now. It should be used to create mixed use developments in different kinds of areas, as opposed to the same old areas. A home and rental improvement funds ought to be available from that fund. We ought to be greenlining second mortgages to allow more home ownership. We ought to be fostering more community redevelopment funds. With respect to the eviction question, we should be providing social services and pro bono legal services for people who are in danger of eviction. So we need to be very much more aggressive with respect to our affordable housing programs in the community, because it's crucial for us to decrease the kind of segregation that we have.
Thank you. Mr. Zimmerman.
Make no mistake, the courts are starting up again. Landlord-tenant proceedings are happening again. If we do nothing, a wave of evictions is coming. And it won't just be a housing crisis, and it won't just be a crisis for the families who lose their homes. It will be a public health crisis, because we all know what the impact will be on the effect of this virus, and we all know where those evictions will be concentrated. So it's not enough to throw some money at the problem, though it's a good step that the county is starting to recognize the gravity of it and starting to spend some resources. Perhaps there would be more resources to spend if they hadn't been diverted to slush funds. But it's also high time that the county aggressively crack down on bad behaving out-of-state landlords, like the scandalous behavior from the TEH Realties of the world. Enough of letting these vultures take advantage of our structures. Enough of sitting around while they take advantage of their tenants and then are the first ones to run to the courthouse and throw people out on the street. We need action. We need it right now, and it's going to take a lot more than pro bono legal help.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Page.
I think first we have to recognize that affordable housing is a basic right, and it's one of the real roles that county government can play in the everyday life of our residents. I'm one of the only people who's ever stood up to the Trump administration and won. And one of the first acts as county executive within 2 weeks of being in office was when I was approached by the local HUD office and asked to sign off on the demolition of 200 homes, public housing homes in North St. Louis County. And I said no. We were approached by a whistleblower who told us that these public housing units could be salvaged. We work with stakeholders to do just that. We've passed an affordable housing trust fund in St. Louis County, which will be fed with medical marijuana tax and offers another opportunity to create seed money to leverage more construction of more affordable housing. We've directed COVID relief funds to rental assistance, to utility assistance, and mortgage assistance.
Thank you. Mr. Manavani.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you want to answer the question?
I thought we were talking about affordable housing, which I already answered.
Okay, I'm very sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
We're going to start with you this time. And we're going to say, how would you increase safety on the metro?
Well, look, it's essentially a combination of errors here, but this is a horrible situation. If the county is going to be responsible for policing on Metrolink, it needs to be much more serious about it. It's not getting the job done. If the county is not going to do the job properly, then I'm in favor actually of a metro police force fully dedicated to it. It hasn't always been this bad. This is a function of the leadership that we've had with respect to the policing on Metrolink over these last few years. It has not always been this bad. We can do better, but we have to collaborate with the city. Or if this is not going to work, we've got to go back to Congress in the compact. This is a matter of will, that more than anything else. If people are committed to resolving this issue, they'll do it, and they have to do it because it's ruining the entire mass transit system for our community as it stands right now.
Okay, Mr. Zimmerman.
There's no limit to what you can get accomplished in politics if you don't care who gets the credit for it. And unfortunately, safety on the metro, and specifically control of that trivial number of police officers, has for too many years been a function of the egos of politicians in this region. Steve Stenger wanted to turn it into a personal plaything and seemed to enjoy being a sparring match with both police leadership and with the mayor of St. Louis. And unfortunately, the current county executive continued that trend, squabbling with the mayor of St. Louis early in his time in office over who would pay for 18 cops on the Metrolink. I don't care who pays for 18 cops on the Metrolink. What I care about is that we implement the safety measures necessary with the line of authority and the chain of command to make sure that people feel safe on critical infrastructure getting to work.
Thank you. Dr. Page.
Whenever our county residents go to the city of St. Louis for attractions or to go to work, they need to feel like they're safe on the Metrolink, and they need to be safe on the Metrolink. St. Louis County has contributed to that safety. We provided officers to supplement the Metro's public safety officers, and our officers have been going into St. Louis City to help for a long time. We recently increased the presence of county officers on the Metro. They're working together on a common radio communication system. And since the last administration has let go, we've been able to increase much more cooperation with Bi-State Public Safety. They have new leadership, and with our police department and with the county police department, a much different effort and experience than we had a year ago. We have made progress here. We've implemented the public safety study. We're moving forward. We've got some work to do, but we're in a much better position than we were a year ago.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Tolliver.
Sorry. So I think that this question can be answered very much the same way that we answered the question about the police reform and or not defunding the police, but rather reallocating funds. And again, I say it, education and communication. I think that if we can retrain the same officers that are working on our metro stations, and we're making sure that the people, the riders, the commuters, and those in the power seats for the metro, if we can make sure that if they understand understand what their responsibilities are, what their limits are. We can make sure that we communicate that to the commuters so that they feel safe. That people don't know they're safe if they don't know in what ways they are being protected, in what ways they are being serviced. So I think that absolutely retraining, and then making sure that we communicate in all areas, both the police officers in charge of the metro as well as to all of the commuters, what is going to happen and how it's going to take place.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Zimmerman, we're going to start with you. And the question is, what is the biggest environmental challenge the county faces? What would you do about it?
The biggest environmental challenge right here and right now is the continued poisoning of citizens in North County by the radioactive aftermath of the Westlake landfill and assorted other deadly deposits in history going back to the Manhattan Project. And leadership in this community under 3 county executives now has failed this community in pretty dramatic ways. And while finally there has been some movement from the federal government, it remains too little, too late. And I've spent a lot of time talking with members of the Just Moms St. Louis group, among others. And the stories I hear are heartbreaking. And we as a region have got to do right by those enduring terrible stories of cancer and premature death and the loss of children because of the failure of leadership institutions.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Page?
Well, it's terrible to hear the stories of the families along Coldwater Creek that have been affected from the radioactive waste and runoff over the years. And we've heard their stories, and we've worked with the Corps of Engineers to move along Coldwater Creek and clean that up. But really the biggest remaining problem in the St. Louis region is the Westlake landfill. We're waiting for the EPA's final recommendation so we can get started removing that waste and getting it out, getting as much of it as possible out of St. Louis County. We're concerned about it. We're concerned about runoff issues. We're concerned not just about the radioactive waste, but the continued pollution of the stench that comes off of the landfill and surrounding landfills that makes it to the point where schools can't open their windows, residents can't open their windows, their kids are sick. And this is a problem that we haven't yet resolved appropriately in our community.
Ms. Tolliver.
So I believe that the radiation that is seeping in all falls under the same premise as it's called environmental racism. The idea that these communities where these things exist are the same communities where they are tearing down buildings, and the codes do not say they need to alert the residents of those areas of the asbestos, the spores, the lead that might be spewed into the air. And these, along with the radiation, are things that do cause lifelong ailments like bronchitis, asthma, cancer. And it makes it so that these are not things that are systemic to these people. These are not hereditary traits. These are things that are given to these people based on where they live at. And I don't think that this is necessarily by accident. This is absolutely systemic environmental racism that has existed for hundreds of years. And I don't think that it's something that will be fixed overnight, but I definitely think it's something that will not be fixed if nobody does something about it right now. So I definitely think that we need to work better with more clubs like the Sierra Club, for example, and making sure that we do our best.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Manavani.
Well, this is the thing that just drives me bonkers when it comes to politicians. My opponents have been in office for year after year after year after year. I know this is a difficult problem at Westlake Landfill, right? And they stand here today talking about either how it's a terrible problem and they're going to get right on it, or they're really doing a lot. And I talk to the people and they don't think anything's being done. They can't even get MSD to change signs asking kids not to swim in Coldwater Creek. This is the sort of stuff that makes people not trust their government, right? Look, I promise this. If I'm elected county executive, I will be there within the first week, and we will be dealing with Republic and the operators of the landfill, and we're going to be getting relief for those people. If we have to consider buying out some of their homes. We're going to do it. I am not going to allow children to get cancer on my watch, and other people
time is
just
up.
go along with this.
Your time is up. And we're going to now have the closing statements. And 1 minute, we're going to start with you, Mr. Manavani.
Okay, fine. Look, for too long, our community has tolerated a lack of aggressiveness, a lack of commitment on behalf of the leadership of our region. And as a consequence of that, our community continues to decline. It is important that we have somebody who can lead the transformation of this community to a different future, to a future that is built on creating economic growth, so that we have the resources to solve these many problems that we talk about. We talk about affordable housing and healthcare issues and the whole range of issues, but nobody's dealing with growing the economic base in order that we can deal with them. Look, we haven't had a leader with the guts and the ability and the commitment to create change in this community for many years. I've got all of those things, and I sure would appreciate your consideration and your vote on August 4th.
Okay, Ms. Tolliver.
Thank you. So thank you again for having me. I definitely think that we are in a community right now where we are in desperate need for change. We are in desperate need for transformation. We are in desperate need for something that is a break from the norm. The way that things have always worked are not working. They have not worked for a very long time, if they ever worked. And I think that now we are in a time period where we need to be more aggressive about what we want to change and making sure that we put in office leadership that is going to make that thing happen. I want to mirror some of the words from Shirley Chisholm that says, I am not the Black candidate, although I am Black and proud. I am not the female candidate, although I'm also proud of that. I am the candidate for the people. And I believe that if you want something to change, you have to be willing to make sure that it looks and sounds and acts like change. We are far beyond the time of just saying, let politics be politics. It's time for the people to take back the politics that they want to seek.
Thank you. Dr. Page?
Thank you. You need and you deserve a county executive with experience in making smart life or death decisions under enormous pressure. As a medical doctor, I've got 20 years of that experience. I think what you've heard tonight is the differences between promises and a record. And I have a record that can be evaluated. In my annual report, we've accomplished a great deal of things. I've been endorsed by progressive groups, townships, elected officials, and many other leaders in our region who've had the chance to work with me and evaluate my record. One thing I would like to ask in my closing minute is to make sure that everyone votes yes for Medicaid expansion. I've been working on this for over a decade in our state. This is an important opportunity to address the healthcare inequities and get to the heart of systemic racism in our community. And I'd be pleased to have your vote on August 4th.
Thank you. Mr. Zimmerman.
There's a real choice in this race, and that's why forums like this one are so helpful and so instructive. Because the fact is, if what you want is the status quo, the same old leadership where the good old boys club and the powerful corporate and development interests call the shots, you got a couple of other good choices in this race. It's not an accident that the big corporate money is flowing. $250,000 at a time from big shot developers to one of my opponents, $25,000, $50,000 at a time from Republican mega donors to the other of my opponents. There's a reason for that. And the reason is that they know with those folks, they will get more of the same. But I've got something better than civic progress. I've got something better than the Republican big money and dark money. I've got you. I've got the people watching here tonight. I've got real Democrats, because real Democrats know that leadership isn't sticking your finger in the wind to try and see what the people want to hear you say. Real leadership is having some values, standing by those values, and having the guts to do what's right no matter what the politics are.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our candidates. And it is possible to get through a lot of issues in a short amount of time in a non-partisan and constructive way. So I thank everybody for that. If you found this to be helpful, please think about joining the League of Women Voters. This is what we do. And look at the voter's guide. And also help your fellow citizens understand this election. Many people are confused about absentee ballots. Have them call the League of Women Voters and we will help them out. I'm going to turn this back over to Harvey Ferdman, one of our hosts, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathleen and Yvette, and thank you to all the candidates. I know everyone is concerned about our community and wants to do the best for everyone here, and that is much appreciated. Many of you have already served in our community, and that's appreciated as well. And with that, Florence, you have any closing words you'd like? You're muted right now. You need to unmute, Florence.
Unmute. Unmute, Florence.
Let's see.
Okay.
There we go.
We just thank everybody for participating tonight. And as the candidate said, be sure to vote on August 4th. And thank you all very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you
That
very much,
concludes
everyone.
And that concludes our meeting. Thank you.
Good night.